today I'm going to be filming a video about like my favourite kind of thought-provoking books. They're not all like fiction, they're all kind of like quite different genres, but they're the sort of things that like you feel like you've learnt something after you've read it, or like it kind of changes your perspective on things. So I hope you like this video. Please like and subscribe, and let's get into it. And I got the idea for this video because like from my mental health books video that went down quite well, so yeah. And I do like reading. So the first book is This Modern Love by Will Derbyshire. He's actually a YouTuber. He doesn't really upload much anymore, but like he used to, like sort of back when YouTube was like going wild. But so this book kind of, I'm just going to read the blurb. So based on over 15,000 submissions from nearly 100 countries, This Modern Love is a unique crowdsourced book that gets to the heart of modern relationships. Tender, funny and cathartic, these letters, tweets and photos remind us that whether we're in or out of love, we're not alone. So yeah, like this kind of covers literally everything from getting into relationships or meeting someone new to like the relationship itself to like breakups, that kind of thing. And I feel like, as it said, wherever you are in like your love journey, whatever, you definitely be able to relate to it. And I quite like that it's hardback. Like it hasn't faded at all. It's probably about 3 years old, this book now. But as you can see, it's just all written very short. Some of them are longer than others. There's like pictures as well. But yeah, I would really recommend this. Like I do dip in and out of it occasionally sometimes as well, but yeah, I really like this. The next one is Anne Frank's Diary of a Young Girl. I'm sure you probably heard of this book, you might have read it as well. We actually studied it in like primary school, I remember. So yeah, I'm going to read the blurb. The Diary of a Young Girl remains the single most poignant true life story to emerge from the Second World War. In July 1942, Anne Frank and her family, fleeing from the horrors of Nazi occupation, hid in the back of an Amsterdam warehouse. Anne was 13 and when the family went into the secret annex, and over the next 2 years she vividly describes in her diary the frustrations of living in such confined quarters, the constant threat of discovery, the hunger and fear. Her diary ends abruptly when in August 1944 she and her family were finally discovered by the Nazis. Anne Frank died in March 1945, aged 15, in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in Germany. This book provides a deeply moving and unforgettable portrait of Anne Frank, an ordinary and yet extraordinary teenage girl. So yeah, like that kind of tells you all about the whole thing, but it's so worth the read. Like honestly, it's just like the fact that she's so young in it. She literally writes about like boys and stuff and like going to the swimming pool with her friends, and like it's just so like innocent and like yeah. I really want my children to read this when they're older. So not that I've got any children right now, but yeah, as I said, it's definitely one you need to read. Next one is The Colour Purple. I read this, I think it was in the summer holidays between like my first and second year of A levels, because we had to like pick a book to like read and then like sort of write about. In the end I chose what's it called, The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, but I did read this as well. So I'll read the blurb to you. The Colour Purple is a classic with over 1 million copies sold in the UK alone. It is hailed one of all-time greats of literature, inspiring generations of readers. Set in the deep Set in the deep American South between the wars, it is a tale of Celie, I think her name is, a young black girl born into poverty and segregation, raped repeatedly by the man she calls father. She has 2 children taken away from her, is separated from her beloved sister Nettie, and is trapped into an ugly marriage. But then she meets the glamorous Shug Avery, singer and magic maker, a woman who has taken charge of her own destiny. Gradually, Celie discovers the power and joy of her own spirit, freeing her from her past and reuniting with those she loves. So yeah, it's definitely something like, obviously you would never really grow up in a situation like that. But yeah, it's honestly, as I said, some of it is quite hard to read. It's quite graphic in places, but again, I feel like it's important to read because obviously people did live their lives like this and didn't have any choice or freedom. So it definitely makes me more grateful after reading it, but yeah, I would really recommend. The next two are kind of like linked. So this is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. So when Elizabeth Bennet first meets an eligible bachelor Fitzwilliam Darcy, she thinks him arrogant and conceited, whilst he struggles to remain indifferent to her good looks and lively mind. When she later discovers that Darcy has involved himself in the troubled relationship between his friend Bingley and her beloved sister Jane, she's determined to dislike him more than ever. In the sparkling comedy of manner that follows, Jane Austen follows the folly of judging by first impressions and superbly evokes the friendships, gossip and snobberies of provincial middle-class life. So yeah, this is like a classic book. Again, you might have read it for like school or whatever, but even though it is kind of quite an old book, it is like a funny book to read. Like the fact that obviously things back then regarding relationships and marriage was so different to attitudes like sort of now. But yeah, it's really good, worth the read. It's a challenging read, but I'll definitely say it's worth it. There is also the film and the TV series, like if you can't be bothered to read it, so yeah, there's options. Following on from that, I found this in a charity shop and it's called Lydia. So the back of it is called, just says, "Remember girls, when you want something you must fight for it, nobody else will do it for you." And this comes from Mrs. Bennet, who is obviously the mother of these girls. So, I swear it does have a proper blurb. But basically, this book is about Lydia, who is one of the sisters in Pride and Prejudice, and it kind of follows her story. She's kind of as it says on the front, it's the wild girl of Pride and Prejudice. So this is kind of it was written about 10 years ago, this book. But as I said, it's kind of written in the style of Jane Austen, and I really enjoyed it. It's quite a short book, so you can get through it quite quickly. She talks about Brighton a lot, like when she moved there, and yeah, I really enjoyed this. As I said, read this one first and then read that one after if you want like an extension of Pride and Prejudice. The next one is actually a fiction book. So this is Truman Capote in Cold Blood. So, controversial and compelling, In Cold Blood reconstructs the murder in 1959 of Kansas farmer and his wife and children. Truman Capote, I'm hoping I'm saying that right, comprehensive study of the killings and subsequent investigation explores the circumstances surrounding this terrible crime and the effect it had on those involved. At the centre of his study are the amoral young killers Perry Smith and Dick Hickok, who, vividly drawn by Capote, are shown to be reprehensible yet entirely frighteningly human. So yeah, this book is so different from what I've ever read before. Again, I think I read it in that same summer I read The Colour Purple. But yeah, so it's obviously it's a real story that happened, but it's kind of him picking apart the murder, but sort of as it happens. It's the way it's written is just really clever, I found. So it literally goes from the family and their day-to-day life. But yeah, it's honestly so good. Like if you're into sort of criminal books or like stories about murder or whatever, I really would recommend this. Finally, I haven't actually read the whole of this. I started reading this at uni, but I had to return it, so I bought it on my own back. But I have read like 3 or 4 chapters and it's like really, really interesting. So this is the Female, I think you pronounce it the Female Eunuch, I think. But if you're a feminist or you're interested in reading more about feminism, really would recommend this. So, a dazzling combination of erudition, eccentricity and eroticism, The Female Eunuch is a worldwide bestseller and a landmark in the history of women's movement. Drawing liberally from history, literature and popular culture, past and present, Germaine Greer's searing examination of women's oppression is both an important social commentary and a passionately argued masterpiece of polemic. Not gonna lie, I don't understand half his words, but the book isn't that hard to read at all. It was written in the 1980s, but it was actually my sociology of education lecturer. He was like, if you are a woman, if you're a young woman, he was like, you need to read this book. So I was like, you know what, I'll give it a go. Like, if it's boring, I'll just give it back. But honestly, it's so interesting the way she talks about female oppression and attitudes towards women. Like, obviously, even though it was written almost 30 years ago now, it's still so relevant today, which I think is just like, it's kind of bad, but it's good to like sort of reflect on. But yeah, as I said, if you're a feminist or want to read more about it, please pick this up because it's so good.